now, Tom.
Yep. Okay.
There you go. Okay, so then,
Perfect.
Yep, you should just be able to go back to your. Yep, that's good.
All right. So basically speaking, we're going from a navigation-centric environment to more of a tile and dashboard-centric. So one thing you notice from a home page is the menu isn't right there, kind of in your face. It's more appealing from an end user perspective, and it's very informational. You can see down in like this corner right here, you have meaningful information that allows you to respond interactively. So 32 here would mean that there are 32 approval tasks in your quote unquote work list, terminology that you're used to today. So when you go into this tile, you'll be able to filter and respond to those items in a much quicker manner. Okay, work centers have evolved a lot within the 9.2 environment. So you're going to have the benefit of implementing a release that has gone through a transition. So within the classic user interface, before Fluid, it was highly functional. However, you couldn't really use it on a mobile device easily, and it didn't have the more modern look and feel. It was more mechanical looking rather than sort of the graphical and more appealing look. So this is an example of a work center. This is on the HCM side. And what you end up having is on the left-hand side, you have the different options that are available, either through responsive, informational type results, or some of the navigations. And what that will allow you to do is be able to not only access information, but respond to things. For example, when you go into a general ledger work center, you don't just go into the work center and navigate to journals to be able to post a journal. Instead, you can go into a work center, click on a link that tells you how many items are available to be posted, and then you can post those items directly from the work center. So extremely interactive, again, reducing the need to navigate. And the whole point is to be able to get somewhere, get there fast, and be able to work any exceptions or any items that need to be worked. From a more technical standpoint, so we kind of introduced some of the benefits of work centers and Fluid. From a technical standpoint, you may be asking, well, how does that change for my role? What am I going to have to learn? What am I going to have to do? So within component properties, one thing that you have is a new tab here, a Fluid tab. I don't know how easily you can see in the back here, but right here we have our Fluid tab. And then within Fluid, you notice that there's a checkbox here for Fluid mode. Okay, so I guess if you just go into a component and check Fluid, you now have a Fluid page, right? Now, we wish it was that easy. Unfortunately, that Fluid could be either on or off, but you can't take an existing page and just check the checkbox and make it Fluid. The reason behind that is there's a lot of technology sort of behind the scenes using cascading style sheets, HTML5, in order to be able to render things the way they need to. So basically, going into different controls. So you have your component level that tells it that it is a Fluid component. Then you go into the individual controls, and that's where the behavior is actually configured from a technical standpoint in order to be able to become rendered as Fluid. So right here, you can override the default style of an existing page and incorporate another style. For some reason you weren't using the default style. Another thing is if for some reason as you're developing fluid pages, you find that something doesn't render quite the way you would expect on a mobile device, and it's a page that you feel needs to render differently, you have the ability to have a default style, but then override that style based off of what type of device the end user has. So there's a little bit more thought into how an end user is going to see the page, and there'll be a little bit more development around looking at a desktop, seeing how a page looks, and then checking it out on a mobile as well. And there are tools that are available that will mimic mobile devices, and I'll show you that when we look at Forms and Approval Builder, how easy it is to be able to go from a desktop view to a mobile view. Okay, so then we also have the ability to suppress different components. In other words, if you didn't want a field or a button or something to show up when somebody's on a mobile device, you can suppress that object so it doesn't show up, because maybe it's not important. Maybe people don't need to see chart field 1 when they're on a mobile device. So you can suppress that, but when they're on a desktop, then they'll see, the full set of chart fields. Okay, this is an example of how your group box definition can look. And as you notice, the main point here is just to show you that you can group things in different ways. For example, as we look into work centers, a lot of the work center pages have the ability to take that left-hand pane, where you're able to access different pieces of information. And perhaps you want to hide that pane. So basically, you can drag that handle over and have access to the full page. So these controls will allow you to be able to handle how that window actually functions. So this is an example of a Fluid Work Center from a runtime perspective. When we get into the details of what it looks in the back end, you see something that looks a little bit more like this. Just to kind of point out a couple things here, you can see we have our subpage for a photo. Well, when go back to that previous page, here's the photo in that location. Okay, then I'm going back and forth just a little bit here. You have your buttons that appear in the upper right-hand corner, and then you have your left-hand navigation. So this group right here, you would have set up to be a pane to be able to hide that as needed. And this page isn't showing it, but a lot of work centers will have the handle right around this location here. And that would allow you to hide this entire piece. So when it kind of comes down to this, has a little bit of familiarity. This is still the page designer that you've used in the past. Just within this, you have some options to be able to handle things differently, a little bit of a different thought process. However, well, if you before PeopleSoft knew PeopleCode. Yeah, none of you, because PeopleSoft had PeopleCode, and PeopleCode was only used for PeopleSoft. So unless you learned PeopleSoft, you'd never know PeopleCode. With the introduction of Fluid, there's a little bit more knowledge that's needed in both HTML5 as well as cascading style sheets. But that knowledge is also transferable. So any skills that you acquire related to cascading style sheets, HTML5, you can transition that to other products as well, because it is a common definition language. But you will have to have some familiarity with it. So that is something that you'll want to get up to speed a bit to make sure you understand. So when you're asked to do Fluid development, that you'll be able to meet the standards. There are some resources available by Oracle. So we have our fluid design standards here. So if you go to peoplesoftinfo.com, you'll find resources there that will help you out with developing fluid pages. In addition, we have a guide for cascading style sheets and the fluid programming fundamentals. So these are all references here, and of course you'll have a PDF of this entire presentation to be able to get into these doc IDs and see what that's all about. So there's no need, if you're trying to write that down, to try to capture that now. All right, so I mentioned before I was going to talk about Form Designer a bit and show you how you can use Form Designer and use features within PeopleSoft to be able to see how things will render on different devices. But before I show you that on this next slide, let me talk about Form Designer a bit. How many of you are familiar with Form Designer? All right, well this is, okay, I said before there's 3 tools that may change the way you do things. I forgot about Forms Designer, there could actually be 4. Forms Designer is intended to be used to develop forms for things that may or may not be PeopleSoft specific. Meaning you may just have some form where you're trying to gather information. That information may or may not be used within PeopleSoft, but you need some sort of automated method to route that form, to have the form approved. And if it is PeopleSoft related data, then there's actual integrations that you can use through component interfaces to be able to take that information and push it out to your PeopleSoft components automatically. Here's an example right here of a tuition reimbursement, something that's higher education specific. You may have other processes to do this, but this is just to kind of understand the concept. This page can be designed within minutes, and it can be designed by a functional user if need be. It's part of our enterprise components. It's not technically people tools. The way this form gets built is you simply take things from this left-hand widget section and you drag and drop things. Oops, I didn't mean to go to the next slide. You drag and drop things into your panel to be able to identify what the label should be, what the length is, and you can set different fields as required. So as you're gathering information, and this is meant to be from an end user, so as you're gathering information, you'll be able to sort of set some integrity to that. For instance, if you choose a prompt, there's an option that you can take existing prompt tables within the system, or I'm sorry, existing records, and use them as prompt tables. Now, from a technical standpoint, you may also develop views that are used within forms. So let's say department IDs, if you just wanted to show department IDs that are related to the user that's logged into the system. Then a view could be created in order to implement that, and that view can then be used as a prompt within the form. But the main point is to be able to use what's already out there, to not have to create a customization or a bolt-on, to be able to take the existing department table as a whole, make that a prompt table, and use it into a form such as this. So all of this implements data integrity. There's behind the scenes, when you look at the records where this is populated, it's not actually building the fields with the labels that you have. It's all metadata. So this is data that can be moved from one environment to another, but not using tools, but more of data migration type technology. This is, it's truly meant to be more of a super user. Your business analysts, or your business analyst, is that, you would probably drive more to development of something like this than asking somebody from the technical folks. And as you can see at the top here, whoops, let me try that again. So as you see at the top here, we have 5 steps going from step 1, which is really just setting what the header is, what is the name of this form. And then what we're looking at right now is the layout. Once you get into step number 3, we're looking at creating instructions for the end user as they fill out the form. And then we have the approval set up. Is this a common problem that you have in this room? Is this something? Okay. Well, if anybody has any ideas, it feels like everything's tight here, so I don't know why the projector keeps going out. So on the approval step, that's where you can actually create simple approvals. So if it just needed to route to central accounting, you develop the form, now it needs to go to central accounting approves it, and then you can do something with it. That something could be as simple as it just saves the form as an approved status and notifies the user, or it can actually populate PeopleSoft components, as I mentioned before. And then the final step is the security, and that would be who you want to have access to the form. Most of the time, that would be delivered roles that you would populate here to be able to leverage the form. All right, so now let's look at the rendering. Up at the top here, we have the different controls. So I don't know how well you can see that in the back here, but these layouts allow you to choose sort of a desktop mode, more of an iPhone or Android-based phone. And then you have something that's more like an iPad. And then you have iPad in the landscape format. So users, sometimes they're going to use, have their phone in this more vertical orientation. Sometimes it's horizontal. So it will actually mimic the different views. What you're seeing right here on this page is, of course, the smallest form factor being for mobile devices or smartphones.
Are you saying that every time you develop, you would want to develop a screen for each one of these? Or? That's
a great question. What this is really doing is, if I understand you correctly, you don't want to have to develop 2 separate things. That'd be my understanding looking at this, and I'm sure that's why you're asking that.
Because I think it sounds like Ajax, which is similar kind of technology using HTML5 and CSS, which will automatically recognize which device you're using and then appropriately size everything.
Exactly. That's exactly what this is, because on this page right here, you're just seeing how it renders differently. You're not developing something different for the smartphones. I'm sometimes getting my tools mixed up because I work on some of the cloud development tools as well. But yeah, this is just showing you how it renders differently. You don't have options to make this render on a smartphone differently from an iPad. Is that correct, John? You still on the line with us? Okay, I may have lost John again.
It's doing it for you. You're just picking the fields.
Exactly.
Depending on what device you're using, it's going to format.
Yeah, sorry, I am still on the line.
Yeah, so let me repeat the question for you. When we're using Form Designer and someone develops a form, there isn't a way to have it rendered differently on a smartphone than what you would have on a desktop, correct?
No, actually, you can. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my phone.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
So when you define a form with Forms in Approval Builder, you have the ability to define that form really for the most appropriate device that you'd like to define it for, and you can see how it would render on a desktop, on a smartphone, on a tablet. But it is one definition for the form.
Okay, so you couldn't have the field suppressed on a smartphone, but be able to view it on a desktop using Forms Builder, correct?
The event mapping capability may give you the ability to do that.
I
That's
didn't
not a
think-
use case I've seen before.
That makes
That
sense.
might work.
I'll cover that when we talk about event mapping, which allows you to, like on component load, you can have like an app package to hide fields. It's not it's more of a bolt-on rather than a customization, but that's a great point. So as a business analyst, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that piece unless that package was already developed and you're calling it. But there is some functionality there. And I apologize, there's a cloud builder product that's very similar to this that works a little differently. So my apologies there. Thank you, John. So branding is something that used to be a lot more complicated than it is today. There's now a wizard-based process where you can upload an image that would set the image to what you see in the upper left-hand corner. So there's your image right there. And then using different controls, you can set the color schemes and all directly from the guided branding tool. So this is train stop where you can go through all the way to publishing the branding options and be able to enhance the way the user sees the page. All right. As far as Fluid is concerned, there's a whole methodology right now. There's different ways that you can apply Fluid to your environment. First off, you'll be able to go out into your PUM images, update the most recent features. So that's one way. Another way is, as probably a business analyst role, go in and create or modify work centers or dashboards, activity guides, this whole list that we have right here. So there's the configuration option. And finally, what a lot of you may be doing here is developing Fluid pages. So just wanted to point out to you that there isn't any one way to adopt Fluid. It's going to be a combination of methods through configuration, adopting the latest releases, as well as developing your own. So in 8.5.6, you haven't had the pleasure of going through some of the previous versions to understand these points, so I'm going to hit them pretty quickly. Within home pages, there's been more of an effort to interact like dashboards. You saw earlier where I had a count in the lower right-hand corner. That's becoming more seamless with 8.5.6, more capabilities there. In addition, you'll be able to create banners at the top of the home pages to be able to help guide the user as far as what that purpose that home page is, and kind of create a reference to the additional tiles on the page. And the second thing with event mapping, I have a slide right after this that gets into more detail, but event mapping in 8.5.6 has, in my opinion, been extended substantially. It took a tool that had this capability, 12 inches and made it 3 feet. And I think that'll become obvious when I show you this next screen. What it allows you to do is get all the way down to a point where if somebody inserts another record, within a page, so if they go into a scroll area, click the plus sign, they have a new record, you could actually call app package people code to perform an app in action. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. And then finally, in 8.5.6, there's been more of an effort to promote the Fluid user interface pages, and so you'll see a lot of tools pages and existing pages converted to a Fluid type. In addition, in 8.5.6, as far as Fluid UI pages, there's also the capability in 8.5.6 to take an existing page and apply a fluid theme to it. It's kind of cheating just a little bit because it has that same look and feel. You'll think it's HTML5, but it really isn't. The only downfall there is it's a static page. It's not going to render differently on a mobile device. You're not going to have the handles that allow you to hide frames within the page. Some of the functionality you'll see in true fluid pages. So as far as, I would not consider the ability to convert existing pages to the fluid style as a replacement to learning how to develop fluid pages yourself, how to or take on the new functionality of fluid pages. It's simply to allow an end user to have the same experience from one page to another, where it doesn't feel like they're going into another system when they go from a fluid page to a classic page. All right, so here's a snapshot, and again, sorry for those of you in the far back. I'll zoom in on this if I can. Let's try that. Yeah, let's see. Somehow just entered into a whole nother world here. Okay, well, zooming's not going to work with that tool that I was just trying to use. So let's do our best here. I'll explain what we have here. All right, so when you're looking to do event mapping, there's I guess there's really three major steps. I'm showing two of those here. Step one is you have to have code that you can call, and at package people code is the way you would do this, implement this functionality. So if you can imagine having that class that you can call, and then you have to have a content service definition to map that. So right here on the left, that's where that content service is actually created. So all that's doing is saying, okay, for this definition, this is the app package people code that you'll want to call. So it's that simple. It's basically just mapping the definition to the people code. Okay, then the final step is to then take that definition and map it to the events that you want to call that code. So in this case here, at the very top, we have the ability to call events at the component level. And then at the page level, so you'll see that you have options either pre-build or post-build within the component. When you get to the page level, you select the page and it's always going to be on activate. So earlier when we were talking about the forms and approval builder, that would probably make sense that on activations, in other words, when the user goes into that form, you may call code that would go in and hide certain fields. So, and that would be something that would be beneficial to add additional functionality to forms that may not exist, but still not having the burden of customizing a delivered object. More of a bolt-on then at that point.
And you said a lot of this is available new in 8.5.6. So you triple the amount of functionality.
Yeah, I believe these first two that I've shown are in 8.5.5 as well, and then going into 8.5.6.
Because we're in 8.5.5.07 right now.
John, do you know? Are you there, John?
Yes, I am. I'm not sure which specific capabilities
Okay.
you're asking about in 8.5.5.
All right. So Yeah, the questions, I think they're on 855 now in
We won't be on,
.07.
yeah, we're not gonna be any higher than 855.17 for the upgrade. So we won't be on 856. It's good to see this stuff, but I'm trying to give our team a sense of, what we may be able to play with during the upgrade.
Okay, all right. So you definitely have this first one at the component level. I believe you have page. What I think you'll be missing, I think this is where things get extremely beneficial from removing the existing customizations to impact future PUM implementations.
Right, that's kind of what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, when you get to this component record level and field level, if you can imagine any of your customizations that you have today where based off of an event, somebody selects a certain field value and you may trigger something based off of that selection. Maybe it will hide fields and make it easier for the end user. That's the part that you may miss because you wouldn't have that ability at the field level and at the record level.
Until you get to 856.
Until you get to 856.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the capability to implement the fluid style. So this is an example of a classic plus page, meaning a classic page that has been applied a fluid style. So as you can see, it looks exactly like any of the other fluid pages we've looked at so far. But again, if you then pull this page up on a mobile device, you'll be back to scrolling around to try to get to things on the right-hand side of the page and the left-hand to be able to, it doesn't render, it doesn't change anything from a rendering perspective. It looks good. It will allow that bridge that some people may need in order to have that consistent feel, but it doesn't change functionality. And here's an example of when you're within that classic plus page of going into one of the modal pages at that point. Okay, and this is just another view of a classic plus page. All right, so page and field configurator. How many of you have looked into this functionality? Okay, so I'm going to spoil it. I think this is going to change things. I truly think page and field configurator. I already know from a standpoint of the customizations that you guys have within grants that you'll be able to get rid of some of those simply through configuration at this point. And I see some heads nodding. So now I don't know the details of any of your customizations within grants, but I did hear an overall arching thing is that things were done to make it simpler for the end user. So I would imagine you've hidden some fields. You've probably made some fields required because you wanted to make sure that they entered certain values that maybe from a PeopleSoft standpoint, they weren't important, but those fields are used in your business and they are very important because you report off of them. You may even trigger some type of actions through automation later on. So does this seem accurate, what I'm saying? Did you make things, kind of dummy things down a bit?
We've done that a lot across the board, I would say.
Okay.
It's on in procurement.
Yeah, other than grants, most of our
Yeah.
spacing stuff.
So I think this has high value to us, whether or not we can do it pre or post 856, what you can drive.
This is available in 855.
All right, so this.
So this is the real deal. You can, now let's just get into this, but basically if you want to hide field, make a field required, if you want to hide a page based off of certain roles and not go through security necessarily, but to be able to hide some of the pages.
Yeah, I want to say like half our customizations are because we're hiding stuff, making things simpler for end users. So
That was the impression I had
this could
from
be really high value for us.
Absolutely. And defaulting values, if you just want to simplify things from that standpoint of, for different roles, you may default different values. So let's kind of dig in a little bit to a real life example. Well, this is a real life made up example. Is that oxymoron? Sorry. All right. So I wish I had a screen that was 10 times larger so you could really see this, but let's work with what we have. So what we have in yellow here are all of the desired changes. Okay, so we have our activity type, and we want to change the default. So when somebody comes in, and again, this is a project costing page just being used as an example, specifically a project definition. So the activity type in this case, we want to default that to packaging. I'm not sure what packaging is, but let's go with that. We want to hide the quality tab because we don't use it. And as far as the percentage complete within project costing, let's say we're using functionality to automatically calculate the percentage complete based off of what's been expended, the remaining time on the project. Doesn't matter how, but let's say we're automating that, so we don't want the end user to go in and update it themselves. So we want to mark that one as read-only. At the bottom here, this description, we're using that description in a very important report. So this report goes to the president. Let's send it all the way up to the level. He's going to see this report, and if he doesn't see a description, he's going to be upset because he wants to see that. So we're going to make that required because got to make the president happy. Then within the activity owner, we want to set that activity owner to be a certain person every time. So meaning we always want the activity owner to be the same person. So that's what we want to do. All right, so how are we going to accomplish all that? Well, okay, I think I have this a little backwards. So let's skip this for a moment. I'm going to have to get back to you after the break to show you the actual page where that was kind of my dessert here, is to show you the configuration page. I'll make sure I get that screenshot in during a break. But basically through a configuration, you're able to, let me see if I just hit it. Okay, that's what happens when you're doing something at 1 o'clock in the morning. Sorry about that. All right, so sorry to keep you guys in suspense, but after a break, we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, so very similar functionality is the approval page composer. It's easy to get the two mixed up. In fact, people with years experience, you could be talking about page and field configurator, and the other person will think you're talking about page composer because mainly their names are similar. But they have different functionality. The page composer is primarily used for your approval pages. So this gives you the ability to, within fluid pages, again, something that will be used highly with smartphones, is making certain fields hidden, or I'm kind of losing my track here, but okay, so if you wanted to add fields that weren't necessarily delivered on the page, you can use the XML-based format to add additional fields. Now, the fields have to be part of that approval process. In other words, you couldn't take some random field far out there. It has to be part of the component. So if you're doing a purchase order, you might be able to do the shipping location, or things that are obvious, but you're not going to be able to grab a grant award number and put that in the approval page. But things that end up making sense. And something that I found within the university world is labels. Labels are a big deal because you may have a field that's called one thing by PeopleSoft, but nobody on campus calls it the same thing. I've been working in grants quite a bit, and there's certain fields that just make no sense to a grants user. And you don't know how many times I've been working on an implementation. I've been asked, "Can we change that label? Can we change this or that?" With both tools, you'll be able to change labels without customization. So this is more from an approval standpoint. Let's see if I missed anything. Okay, you can change the order as well. So If you want to put some of the most important fields in the top, you can do that. And and it also applies to links and buttons and things. If you want to hide those, you can do that as well. Fluid approvals, I don't think you're going to necessarily care about when they're implemented, but the whole idea is that no longer do we want to require someone to be at a desk to be able to approve something. Because most of the time, when an approval is urgent, there isn't time to wait for someone to get back to their office. You know, if you have a dean that's at the airport trying to approve a purchase for a grant, then that purchase can't wait. So rather than, from my perspective, I think what this may help is this is a security feature as well. I may be stretching it just a little bit, but let's think about this for a minute. Today, if the dean needs something approved, how possible it is that he may give somebody his password and say, hey, can you log in and approve this for me? I'm at the airport, I can't do it. We don't like to admit that some of those things happen, but they happen. People are providing credentials at times to get things done. So the idea of being able to implement Fluid to prevent some of those types of activities from occurring is an indirect benefit. Nothing you'll see in any of Oracle's advertising, but just from my experience, I think you'll benefit from that. John, did you have something?
Yes, one other just point on that particular topic is that the Fluid approvals are the ones that are available to the page composer. So those process flows that are available now in Fluid within AWS are the ones that you can configure through page composer.
Excellent. Okay, so now we're moving on to simplified analytics. I like the term, but what it does is it gives the end user a little bit more power and control to view data the way they need to see it. So it's moving things not just from a technical standpoint or a business analyst standpoint, but this is now moving it to the user to be able to say, I want to see this chart in a certain way. I want to be able to take the data and make this dashboard my own. So simplified analytics is sort of the implementation mechanism to give that user the power to be able to do that. And it's embedded within transactions. So, queries, kind of considered a little old-fashioned by some people. You go in, you develop a query, and run the query, do something with the results, usually export them to Excel, right? That's the way probably most of your queries are used today. Is that fair? The modern queries, I'm just going to skip a few of these, but modern today queries are interactive. And the whole idea and concept between Fluid, between the simplified analytics, and now bringing that into query as well, is to not create static type information. We want to create dynamic information. Not only do we want to show results, but we want somebody to be able to do something with those results. So now within query, you have the capability to embed URL information that adds drill down capability to your query results. So I think that's really cool. It's not one of the major features. I don't think it's life-changing. It's not going to get rid of a bunch of customizations. But from an end user standpoint, being able to run a query, drill into that, get a whole nother set of results, I think is something that would be very well responded by your users. Okay, pivot grids. Pivot grids, it's another thing. I think you use pivot grids in 9.1 today. Yeah, the concept of pivot grids was released in 9.1. 9.2, I wouldn't even say it was early on, but for the image that you're on now, it's been completely transformed. Now you have the handle that you can hide. And when you bring up the information within this little page here, you're able to narrow down the results in a really sophisticated manner. I mean, it's you don't have to have more of a technical experience. It's more of a functional experience when users go into pivot grids today. And what I'm hoping is I'll have time at the end. What I'd like to do is show you how a pivot grid can be developed and then published as a tile within minutes. So you can take something from a query, implement that as a pivot grid, and have that as a tile in a dashboard. And somebody will think that you spent days on it when you may have just spent minutes on it. And that's what we want to do. We want to provide, as a technical team, you want to provide your business users more in less time, and this is one of the ways to do that. This is an example of the simplified analytics within a transaction, and this is how you tend to see it within the application. Over here on the right-hand panel, you can see that's the My Analytics section. An end user would be able to go in and add their analytics. When they do so, they're presented with a wizard that allows them to choose what fields they want to display, and then be able to manipulate and save those end results. So if they wanted to see it in a bar chart, they could see it that way, but then you can also see at the bottom here, there's options, do a pie chart, and so forth. And this is an example here of taking an existing pivot grid and incorporating that as a tile on a home page. So I think there could be a lot of power to this. And when you create that tile, you can specify it for certain roles, or maybe it's permissionless. Sorry if I get too mixed up. But when you specify who should see this, you can really make that content pretty relevant to the different positions that you have within the university. This is another one of my favorite features that's not necessarily earth-shattering from a development standpoint, but from a user experience standpoint, I would find it very difficult to justify not implementing the Elasticsearch capability that comes with the 855. I'm trying to think about that for a minute, because it was one of the releases in 855, but I think it might be after 07. John?
Yeah, it's 855.11.
Oh, darn.
Well, we're going to be on 855.17 when we do the upgrade.
Perfect.
So as we build every environment, we're building with 855.17. So
Okay,
we'll have
excellent.
it soon enough.
So if you haven't done a whole lot of research in Elasticsearch, Elasticsearch uses open standards. So it's not proprietary to Oracle. It's an open standard method to be able to crawl through data and be able to use that, search that data. Now what PeopleSoft then does is it takes the results that come in and it makes it actionable. So you can go into your, this is kind of hiding it here, but you can go into your search dialog box, which is right behind this window here, enter a search term. When you're presented results, drill right into the transaction, drill into the navigation, whatever it is that you may be searching. So you may search the word project to be able to go into a project definition page, or you may search for Elm's Diner to be able to go into a vendor page, or I'm sorry, supplier page to be able to view supplier information. So the idea, again, this is the whole concept of let's get away from navigation. let's give more of an Amazon.com look and feel to be able to search for things and act upon them without navigating. So navigation should truly be limited to like 10% of what somebody may do, maybe even less than that. There's so many tools available in 9.2 today that to have to navigate somewhere, it should be to navigate to get there, to then add it as a tile or make it some sort of part of a home page. But in any case, the global search, it uses Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch has, I think I might have more slide on this. Let's see. Yeah, Elasticsearch provides load balancing capability, or I'm sorry, that may be the wrong term. Some redundancy. So you point to multiple servers in order to make sure if one goes down or if one's doing a search, you have a lot of flexibility there to make sure that it's up and running at all times. It's extremely easy to implement. You may have run into struggles implementing secure enterprise search, and a lot of customers who have struggled to implement that functionality find that Elastic is much easier. It's really meant to be an appliance where you get it up and running and it does its thing. As a functional user, what they're going to like the most is not only do they get this look and feel and be able to act upon search results, but this might be 856 functionality. I think it is, where Elasticsearch will also search through document attachments. So if somebody attaches a Word document, Elasticsearch will actually get into that Word document and you'll be able to search off of terms within the Word document. So that's game changer, I think, from an ERP standpoint. I don't know if there's another ERP system that provides that type of functionality to be able to drill into documents from the search page. All right, so we're not talking about cloud in this instance, so don't let the cloud term fool you here. Something that's available in, I believe it was 856 is when this was released, is the ability to attach documents that are from a cloud service provider. So if a lot of my use cases is around expenses where somebody's traveling, then they take a picture of a receipt and they may store that on their iPhone or OneDrive and upload it later into PeopleSoft. But other possible use cases could be you may scan 1099s and have them go into some type of document management cloud service that you already own. This would give you the ability to connect to that service and bring that document in to a transaction. So you don't have to be limited to just what's stored on an iPhone when you're adding documents or what's stored on your physical computer. 856 allows you to bring in things from OneDrive, Dropbox, Oracle documents, and so forth. I'm going to go through these next few slides pretty quickly. This is just showing you some of the technical requirements for the various features and so forth within Tools 856. I don't know how much that. Yeah, I'm just going to run through these because you're not even implementing 856 yet. So when you get to that point, you'll be in the PDF document that we send out to you. So that will have all the requirements. So let's talk about security for a moment. 856 has some behind-the-scenes enhancements that will help with security, more robust forgotten password, and some additional features that may help integrate with other products. I didn't get a chance to see what you own as far as some of the security features. Again, this will be in your PDF document, so we're not going to get into great detail. But if you had interest, or if you use identity management or many of the other security tools that are available, PeopleTools 856 is providing additional features to make it easier to either implement, use, or configure those other Oracle products. So this is a feature you're not going to see. It's not something I can necessarily show you, but it's available as part of the tool. It's part of the work that's been done for that product. All right, so let's talk about lifecycle management for a bit. So we talked about how the methodology is changing a bit from these major upgrades to, or has changed, it changed a while ago, from doing major upgrades to getting updates more frequently, giving the end users more functionality quicker, and allowing you to control when and if you want to implement certain functionality. So that's part of our selective adoption features. And we provide quite a few tools that have evolved through the initial PUM images that were available. So what we've had a lot of focus on is the analytics behind maintaining your various PUM images. PeopleSoft Update Manager is, okay, I'll show you a little bit more in the analytics, but before we get to that, let me talk about the PeopleSoft Update Manager. It has a very much of a wizard type look and feel. It's making it a little bit, when you think of Change Assistant and the learning curve for learning Change Assistant, the Update Manager provides a little bit of a faster learning curve to be able to develop packages to implement at a later time. We have one single line of code, so we're not dealing with maintenance packs, bundles, upgrade images where you have to try to figure out, well, what am I on right now? It's one set of code to manage all of it, with frequent updates and updates that you can choose whether or not to install. All right, so as far as using the Update Manager, periodically you'll go out there and you'll look and pull the latest PUM image that's available. We also have deployment packages that I'll talk about later that work a little bit differently. But you'll have an environment that you can easily download and bring up within a virtual machine. You can use that to see what new functionality is available. But it's also used to pick and choose what functionality you want to implement. Once you've done so, it creates a package that you could then apply through Change Assistant into your various PeopleSoft environments. Most of the time, you'll start out with your demo environment and then move up your test code. Bless you. So here we are going from development, and you have staging and production. So you still have that flow to that process to test. You're in control. It's not somebody, we're not pushing updates that you have to apply. There's no schedule involved. Nothing like that at all. So here's just kind of a look at the various steps to break down the image update process. So here's where we're searching for an image, selecting target database. And I thought this got into a little bit more detail there, but again, I mean, I almost feel like I'm repeating. I think I am actually repeating myself so much. As the whole concept here is getting that new functionality and getting it in the hands of your end users quickly. Okay, so deployment packages. How many of you are familiar with the deployment package methodology? This is a little bit newer. Most of you are probably familiar with the images. All right, when you download an image, that image is part of a virtual machine, so it sits inside of its own little box. And you could do what you want to within that box, but it doesn't allow you to easily implement that into an existing like Windows environment. Does that seem familiar to you all? Some of the struggles you may have with downloading images today and then doing something with it. Well, deployment packages, it's sort of a scripted method to be able to take the update, bring it into an existing operating system you have today. It could be Windows or Linux, and be able to stand up an environment through a scripted manner. Back when 9.2 first came out, I can remember I was actually working as a manager at the time, but I wanted to see 9.2, so I downloaded it and installed it on my laptop. It took probably 12 hours in all to figure out how to do that, to run the various steps, install the app. Yeah, it was fairly time consuming, with the schedule I had at the time. I really wish we had the deployment package, because what the deployment package does is you download the deployment package and it creates a series of zip files. You unpackage the first zip file, go into Windows shell screen, enter a few commands. What that does is it uses Puppet. And if you're not familiar with Puppet, what Puppet does is it goes out and it looks at some of your existing environmental information, things that the system already knows that in a traditional install you would have to tell PeopleSoft about it. Well, that whole step has been removed. So now Puppet will go in. It'll know what operating system. It will know all the basic information, so you don't have to enter it. So you enter a few things through the script, and also you have your environment. So I mean, I would say you could do it if you already have it downloaded. You could have an environment in probably 15, 20 minutes. If you haven't downloaded it yet, it may take a little bit longer to download and unpackage it. John, does that seem about right from your experience? It's I would say in less than an hour, you could probably have an environment stood up on your operating system. Is that about a fair statement?
That's definitely a fair statement. I think when we spin one up within our cloud environment, we are able to do it in about 45 minutes. Somewhere between a half an hour and 45 minutes. So mileage varies depending upon the type of horsepower on the infrastructure, but that's about the time that we typically try to shoot for with these DPKs.
So, and these DPKs are portable, so you can package up existing environments and port them to other places. It's meant to simplify things. Some of this was developed with the thought and mindset of we have a lot of customers who have made the decision to move to a cloud service, and that allowed them to be able to do that easily, without getting into too many details there. But it's also provided a lot of benefit to easily stand up an environment with your existing platform. Gosh, every time I look at these slides, I think, okay, here's another feature that I think really changes things. Are you using Data Migration Workbench in 9.1? I think it's available, and it's probably extended a lot since you implemented 9.1. We've talked a lot about work centers, pivot grids, and dashboards, and then we have activity guides. So in the back of your mind somewhere, you must be thinking, how does all this get maintained? We have test environments. We're not going to want people doing this in production without testing it first. We have development environments. How is all this going to be managed? The Data Migration Workbench is the answer to that question. So since these are not people tools type objects, since we've been talking about metadata, this tool has been implemented. I would say a business analyst type role would be able to easily use this type of functionality. Allocations, I don't have that listed here, but I know you use allocations. And allocations can be, that was one of the first, I think in 9.1 you have the capability through the Migration Workbench to move allocations from one environment to another. Back in the day, I can remember configuring things like allocations. In this case now it's expanded a lot. In one environment, going into next environment, come back in, doing it again. And it's time to go into production, doing it again. Oh, maybe you haven't made it to production yet, and you had a refresh. Shoot, I've got to re-enter all that information. The migration workbench takes all that away. Have you had some of those experiences? So it's quite time consuming, and this will save a lot of time and aggravation of redoing work that you've already done. It's hard enough to do it once. You know, why do we need to do it again? Okay, so now we get into PUM analytics. The whole purpose of PUM analytics is to get an understanding of how you're using the latest images, how up to date you're keeping your environment, and to really just provide information that can help you determine what your next step should be. And I think at this point I will probably take a break before I get too deeply into it, but that's a quick introduction of the PUM analytics, is really just a kind of a pulse check of how you're using PUM. It's my understanding I think it's time for about a 15-minute break. So say about 10:50, be back over here.
Sounds good.
All right.
So 10:50 we'll start.
Got some coffee over there.
Yeah, there's coffee in the break room.
Yeah. Well, we've got.
Oh, you brought some?
Yeah, so we've got some coffee in there.
Yeah, we'll bring it in. We'll grab it back in. Yeah. All good stuff. A lot of good stuff.
Now, what I'm going to do during this break is I'm going to log in. I'm going to log into one of our demo environments.
Sure.
Just do a quick overview of what some of this stuff looks like.
That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you.
At some point, maybe towards the end or after, I'd like to talk to you about the PS query in 856, because there's any changes to that. Reports we write. We have 7 reports we create for annual reporting. When we use source queries, PS queries is the baseline to where we can't use a tree as completely configured as it is for one purpose. Campus based report, we have to move count sources around it. Well, okay, for purposes of day-to-day year, it's good to have the transaction file there. But when we lose the file that's one report, we have to say, well, these sources or these accounts have to be reported to this group. Well, Kristen did say she actually excluded from this group. So we're using PS queries to do that. We also are calling the entry function, which forces you to select a certain affected data tree. Well, if we make changes to the tree and move the trees out, then we have to go rebuild all those reports again. So we've already gone through 3 rounds already, so we're trying to figure out a better way of doing that. One of the ways Alan has developed a view which allows you to flatten tree information. So that he pulls it all together in one view, trees, tree notes, and everything. But I don't know how I can use that
tree
for.
flattener now.
Well, I don't. That'd be interesting to know. But anyway, he developed something that I'm going to try to use as a join table to join view with Legend. The only problem we're worried about is that I'll then not be able to use implosion natively in those Excel groups to reflect around one. Well, ideally, there's an option on PS query for tree prompt, but as the notes say, it can't be used in anything where it's called by a program. So there's that. You need some way in which we dynamically change the reference tree inside the PS query itself. We can change it at the layout level by making it, forcing a request to say, use the asset reporting data to get the most effective tree. But that only affects the layout. That would affect the source code.
So, because it visually adds to it, doesn't change.
I wonder,
So I'm trying to.
I haven't worked a whole lot in this, but I almost wonder, what is it about Envision reports?
It's just,
Well, I'm trying to figure, I've been thinking out loud just a little bit, but,
move pretty quick.
all right, so you're using the Envision tool. Do you have a reason that it's in Envision and it can't be a pivot grid?
I think it's because of the way we have counting reports that we report to the state with, CAFR. And so,
Okay, all right.
and so we have to show things in a certain group, and then show it right out.
As soon as you said CAFRA, that answers that.
That's why we're using the Envision. But
And then you should be able to just go back to PowerPoint.
All right, I'm going to pull up another PowerPoint
Okay.
to show the slide I was missing.
All right. I will be upstairs. Anybody need? Thank you.
Thank you. So I didn't have it in that PowerPoint. That's why I didn't bring it up.
sure what happened with your missing slide.
I just did. I think I was trying to simplify it for a functional demo, so I didn't get into how it was done. And again, that was just doing that.
I think the first part. First part.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Now I need to move this slide into the.
So we're gonna, based on the agenda, we're gonna go to about 11:45. We'll do Q&A for 15 minutes or so.
Wow, time is flying.
Steam and heat in the hands when we raw.
I've got a
I just want to spoil the.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So where did you guys fly in from?
Well, luckily I just drove from Charlotte, but Tennessee.
Nashville.
Nashville.
Pretty easy flight.
Yeah, you didn't really get bad weather. It's cold.
They've
right?
actually closed schools there because of the cold. It's been in the teens, low 20s is the high.
That's what they did a couple of days back with Shelly. For 2 hours.
Yeah, they did that on Tuesday, right? The
They
first
did
day
it on
back for
Tuesday,
some kids.
then they did it on Wednesday, which I was.
We left early Wednesday.
Yeah, but that was early Wednesday to an offsite.
It doesn't make sense. They're so developed. Stood around cold bus stops.
Oh, nothing on my case.
Well, I think that was one of those one-off cases where the buses it started to go around and trouble, so the buses were behind.
All right, folks, we're going to get started in a couple seconds here, so you guys back to your seats.
Listening has to power. I'll figure that out. All right, so earlier I told you about the page and field configurator, and we went over it. We were about to have dessert, and it was never served. So let's have some dessert. All right, so this is a behind-the-scenes look at what the page and field configurator looks like. And it's incredibly simple to use. It surprised me, and I'm not saying that as an Oracle, I'm saying this as from my experience as a consultant and everything else. I found that there just wasn't much to this that made me, because you think you hear this, a piece of functionality that would allow you to do everything that we discussed. And the first thought would be is, all right, that must be pretty complicated. There's got to be a catch here. And when I actually started playing around with this, I realized that no, this is kind of a real deal thing here, because you select the component. You can see up here, have a component name of project activity. Then once you pull in the component, it's going to allow you to add which fields that you want to make a change to. So you can see it's not listing all of the fields. We just have the fields down here that we're actually, oops. Sorry about that, hold on. So we have the fields down here that we actually want to make changes to. So here's our activity type field at the top, number 1. And what you can see is right here, we put in PKG as a default value. And that was it. So, I mean, we just added the field, typed in PKG, and now we have a default value for that field. For activity owner, we're modifying the label and entered the label as well as a default value for that. So now instead of saying activity owner, it's responsible party. That's what the label will show. Now, we talked about percentage complete. We wanted to make sure that that was locked down so the end user couldn't change it since we were using the automated calculations. So here, let's check a checkbox, disable entry. That just now made that a read-only field.
Is that going to overwrite the base security? Say if someone has update access to that page and you disable that field?
That's a good question.
That's the whole point of this, because the update access would be at the page component level, not down to the field level. So what this is doing is it's disabling it at the field level, so that would override security at that point. So you have a field that would be editable, and now we just made it read-only.
So for every user, that field would not be used. That
Well,
would be turned off.
Here's the catch there is you have a user list. That user list can be individual users. Wish I had a screenshot of it. Oh, here it is.
So you can apply it to a set of users or specific users.
Correct. So here we go. Applies to, oops. Applies to all users with exceptions in this case. So every user would have a read-only or have these changes except for, in this case, Jane Smith. Jane Smith will see the original page. Everybody else will see what's configured here.
So you can control that firewall. You have to have the user ID with that.
The applies to gives the options of how you would do that. And honestly, I don't remember what's available in there. I believe it can do permissionless enroll.
I'd be surprised if it could do that.
Yeah.
Based on those.
No, that's the one disadvantage of, we can get through things a lot quicker in a PowerPoint, so you get all the information quicker, but then when it's, hey, what's in that? I'm sorry, I can't show that, but.
Well, then we can explore a little bit ourselves.
Yeah. And I have a feeling you guys are going to explore this as soon as you do. You know, this will probably be one of the first things at the top of your list.
Yeah.
All right, so I think well, here, let me. So then we made the description field required, because remember we have the president who's going to get this report, if the description is not populated, he's not going to be happy, or she. At the very bottom here, you have a spot here where you're just setting a page to not visible. So for every user except for Jane, they're not going to see this project quality page. Now that I would say is probably the least beneficial of everything. I think most of what you're going to use is up here. It's great that you can hide a page, but it's very easy to do that in security as well. So
Right.
I'm not saying that as game changer. This doesn't get rid of customizations down here at the bottom.
Like this does.
Page,
though.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's where the
I
value is.
love this.
You love this.
So
I
yeah,
love
this is the big opportunity. it seems.
And technically, this is not even tools. This is part of your enterprise components navigation. So it's really meant for business users to be able to go in and make changes without having to contact development. Now, how you implement that, who you give the security to access the page and field configurator is up to you. But it truly is meant to be more business analyst type functionality.
Is the things like customized labels and stuff, is that stored in separate new metatables compared to where we've done it on labels and field properties in the past at the control level?
That is my understanding completely. John, do you, I don't know if you're there or not. I'm gonna.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that is my understanding as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and that would be really the whole point of being able to do this without customizing, because that's right. It's got to be that way because it doesn't show up on compare reports. That was kind of a negative, but at the same time, I don't know why you would need it to show in a compare report because it's just configuration. So this is probably my favorite piece of functionality. All right, so I wanted to insert this in the context of what we had talked about. So now I'm going to get back to where we were before.
Yeah, thanks for circling back, though. That was very good.
Hey, not a problem. I'm sorry that wasn't in there. I realized I pulled it from a functional presentation where I intentionally left that piece out because I didn't want the audience to get into those details. So I apologize for that not being there. Okay, so before the break, we were on the slide here with PUM Analytics.
I'm sorry, I jumped in, we probably talked about this earlier, but can we, is there a way to, this might be a really stupid question, to link this page and field configuration capability to selection of the workflow we want to use?
Selection of the workflow.
So if you have a page that ordinarily has workflow associated with it, and you use that whatever that workflow is,
like the approval page.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's still
absolutely any component.
Okay.
If it has a component, that page is supposed to. Now the caveat of, but there's tests. Just make sure that it has the expected results that you want, and I feel pretty confident you'll be happy with it.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, so back to PUM Analytics. We want to be able to visualize what we've done, what we haven't done. So these dashboards give you the capability of showing what's available. Like in this dashboard right here, in this section, enhancements by image. And I apologize for this term, bugs. It can't be an enhancement and a bug, but because PeopleSoft has looked at enhancements from the terminology of creating a bug to creating an enhancement, that's just the way it shows up on here. But it's my understanding that that's going to be changing in the future. You're going to separate enhancements versus bugs a little more.
You're trying to show what truly the enhancements are.
These are really changes, right?
These are the changes. So this is showing you by image how many pieces. I think this dashboard might be what's been implemented. here it is by product, what's available as far as the different bugs and enhancements. But it's just sort of some graphical analysis that you can do. This particular graph right here, what it's doing is it's showing you the relative time that you may apply things. So I think it's easier to explain by an example. So let's say you're on image 27, which is, this is what you plan to go live with. And image 28 comes out. There are bugs in image 28 that you haven't applied yet. So, I think I'm getting this backwards a little bit. Okay, so if you've adopted some of the functionality, not everything in image 27, there's some functionality that's in 26 that you haven't adopted yet, that would be a -1. If you haven't adopted some functionality, let's say, okay, let's back up. Let me start over here. Let's see where you start. All right, let's say you're on image, let's see here, 26.9.
We have to make a jump. Are you saying if we have to make a jump of 8 images, that's the number of changes there are that we're missing?
That would be correct for each of the images. If I understood the question completely, so basically if you are on image 28 and if you're on image 20 and you've implemented, say, 100% of image 20 and 28 is now available, then you would show this number of items. So you'd be at a -9 for about 220 quote unquote bugs. So that's what your lag would be for the number of items based on the current image that you've fully implemented. So hopefully I didn't bosh it up too much. John, do you want to correct anything I may have?
No, that's correct. I mean, the PUM analytics essentially, they'll just make it very apparent which things you have selectively adopted from each image. And we'll show you if maybe you skipped an image and you haven't selectively adopted any of the changes. And so it's really just to highlight the fact that an image came out and you selectively adopted some of the functionality or all of the functionality. And, I guess, what I think it should also highlight is that what we recommend is that if you can, if possible, do a full update, without selectively adopting and get completely caught up about once a year, if you can, and that will keep you from getting into the situation of it having a very large update that could potentially almost be the same type of effort as the old upgrades that we no longer have. So it's a way to kind of keep track and see the level of how selective you've been, or if you've been able to catch up on the enhancements and the patches that have been rolled out in the PUM updates.
So let me take this one step further. So if you've got support for financial reporting rules for Japan, and we never needed that. We will never need that. But that's going to be in the image. So you're saying rather than us never taking any of that Japan stuff, what we want to do is we want to at least annually update with everything so we don't fall too far behind.
I would agree with that.
That's
Yeah.
That's right. And I know there are some things that aren't going to be leveraged, and in most cases those don't end up being prerequisites for other changes. But what will happen is, in some cases, there will be a change that gets put in, and that may end up being a prerequisite for something that you do want further on down the line. Now, selective adoption, the whole process is smart enough to know that if there are prerequisites and you've only and you've skipped that prerequisite, but now there's a feature that you'd like, it will go back and it will bundle together the prerequisite with the new feature that you're looking to selectively adopt.
And that prerequisite may be a change that was made for Japan, but if it's a prerequisite, it's got to come in.
So pulls it in as part of the.
So it's selective to a point.
It's.
Selective to a point. I mean, we can't say this stuff we're never ever going to use. Let's make the PUM smaller for every time we do a PUM, right? You can't do that because what you're saying here is, you should really true everything up.
You could selectively adopt everything that you would ever use, and once you do that, though, you're probably going to end up pulling a lot of that stuff in as prerequisites anyway. And then at that point, you're bringing in the full image.
You're making a mess here. You might as well just.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, are you using People Tools Test Framework in each? Well, I guess you haven't gone live with 9 or.
Well, it's in People Tools. We have not used it.
Okay.
We've dabbled with it, but we haven't really ever made an effort to use
Maybe
it.
we should be. We're not yet.
We have not found the time.
Now you're on 851 right now, in financials.
Well, we're on 85507
855,
People
okay.
Tools. So it's been available to us for quite a while. I thought it was available in 853.
It was originally 851, if I remember. It might have even been 849, but 853 is when it became the most useful. A lot of the bugs got worked out from the earlier stages. I would say that if you can get a chance to invest, and I use that term seriously, invest in some of the People Tools Test Framework functionality, it will pay huge dividends later. And I say that because with the PUM image updates and with doing about annual shore ups, with the automated processes, you'll be able to get through the testing, I like to say no time at all, because you'll be able to run these automated. You can kick them off at night, and it will run through, let's say, your procure to pay process. And you'll get a report the next day that shows you anywhere where there is any issues or differences that they weren't expecting. Now, I say at night, something like that can probably run and much quicker than that. But it is an investment because it takes time to build these. I know there's some out-of-the-box tests available. More than likely, there'll have to be some tweak. US 001's not in your environment. You'll have to make sure you get your business units in there. But a lot of work has been done to shorten the amount of time it takes to create the scripts and to make the scripts more flexible. So what you'll find in 856, and you may have some of this in 855, you'll be able to create query results or develop queries and be able to develop your tests around those queries so it's using the information returned in the queries for your tests. So that allows it a little bit easier, so you're not having to hard code a lot of data. And if you test like I've seen testing done in the past, you try to use what already exists as much as you can, and then you have a portion of tests where it's new data to make sure that you can handle existing and new data as well. So all of your existing data that you want to interact with in testing can easily be integrated and dynamically set up in PTF.
So have you worked with clients who have implemented this? How long does it take them to script operating tests.
I don't know if anybody has ever just scripted all of the tests. I think it's an iterative process where you pick your highest profile things. You know, you start with your procure to pay or your grants to billing, or you take those higher level, get the big wins, and then you build as you go. So I wish I could answer that, but I don't know. John, do you know anybody who's just sat and developed all of their tests?
Well, no, I don't, but just to kind of bring this up a level, one of the changes that have been put into place is that we've recently just begun providing those sample tests as part of some of the later versions of the application, and so that wasn't something that really we allowed people to get that jump start with, and so that was probably one of the things you ran into before when you were initially taking a look at test framework was kind of where you start, and so those sample tests that we provide should hopefully give you a good jumping off point as well. I mean, there is a consulting service that we have to get it set up and help you with the definition of a few tests as well as some explanation of the process to get you going on that. But looking at the test framework again at a little bit higher level, what we also offer is what's called the usage monitor, which is part of the performance monitor. So if you stand up a performance monitor / usage monitor instance, it allows you to see the areas of the application that are getting used the heaviest. And it also allows you to find out which areas of the system should be your priorities for creating test cases, and which areas of the system you don't have to really think about that for. Hopefully that makes sense. And so the test framework is very PeopleSoft metadata aware, and so what that means is that you can compare your use of the system using the usage monitor and find out which areas you should be testing. But then also once you start creating test cases and you have a library of test cases, if you're going to have developers doing development work, or if you're going to maybe selectively adopt some functionality from a new PUM image, you can take whatever change you're going to move into your PeopleSoft environment, and you can compare that with your library of test cases to tell you which tests you should run, but it will also identify for you if there are areas with your customization or with your selective adoption that you're going to move into your environment that don't have any test cases that address those objects. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's very tightly integrated with the with the lifecycle management capabilities, and it's very metadata aware, and that's what makes it different from any other regression testing tool that you might use. Is that level of cognizance of the objects within the PeopleSoft environment.
John, that was excellent. I appreciate that. I think I may need to talk to you a little bit more. It sounds like I can incorporate that in some of these future discussions because, it's I think it's definitely worth the time to dig into deeply. Okay, so I already kind of got into some of the query-based testing. Kind of got ahead of myself here, and since we have a lot of graphical pieces, People's Test Framework is able to handle those as well. Testing charts. Let's just move on here to the Health Center. So the PeopleSoft Health Center is used to monitor the status of your environment. This is more for alerting you to possible issues that you may have from more of kind of a database application network infrastructure standpoint, and to alert you of possible problems. So here's an example of a dashboard that's available in the health center. And you can see down here we have different statuses. So for this particular server, it's showing that it can't connect. The overall status is okay, with the light load status, meaning that there aren't a lot of users hitting at the server. So we have our web servers, application servers, and the statuses within each of those. Here's another look that gives you a little bit more detail on CPU and virtual memory usage. And then a third dashboard that's given some additional information. Some of you will probably understand what's in this graph better than I can, but it's all meant to have a better understanding of how your system resources are being used. Just kind of going through these, allowing you to look at them here. Okay, and these are drillable and provide alerts.
Sorry, did you say this was an 856 thing? Is this a we can use now thing?
I think it's probably 856, right, John?
Just trying to make sure I understand what's we can take advantage of now versus later. That's
The help center?
Or is it
Yeah.
5.5?
yeah. Do you know when that comes into play?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was an 855 and enhanced to 856.
Okay.
And more than likely, a lot of these screenshots are probably from 856, but one little clue I see right here is, I don't know if that T55 is an 855 environment, but.
Right. Well, we can look at
So
it.
so is this part of the performance monitor? So my understanding is that if you set up the performance monitor, you have to set it up in a separate instance, correct? Is that correct?
John, do you have any idea on the setup? I thought this was part of
That is correct. Performance monitor and usage monitor are kind of like their own PIA pillar of their own.
Okay.
And
what about the health center?
The health center actually resides within the interaction hub.
Okay. All right.
So that's the pillar. That's the interaction hub.
And I jumped ahead to a different slide. I'll come back to the ones I skipped. What the main purpose that we wanted to bring some of this up is that there's three tools for monitoring performance. We have the health center that we were just looking at, the PeopleSoft Performance Monitor, as well as Enterprise Manager with PeopleSoft AMS, and they work together. It's not a one versus the other. This one's better than that one. They serve different purposes. And here's sort of a more detailed breakdown of what each of these do. We don't really have time to go through all of this individually. This would be another thing to go back and look at the PDF.
So if they link together, do you have to go to each dashboard separately?
I believe they're separate. Is that right, John?
Yeah, they're separate user interfaces for each one of them, and the application management suite for PeopleSoft is actually that's not in PeopleSoft at all. That's kind of part of Enterprise Manager.
So that's the old OEM that's been around for a while. And Performance Manager has been around for a while too. Is the PeopleSoft Health Center new?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if I skipped anything else that we want to discuss. Okay, I may have gotten ahead of myself earlier talking about deployment packages, so I don't think there's anything here I was going to talk about to add to this. We talked about Puppet and that ability. Yeah, I got way ahead of myself earlier. All right, so we're actually wrapping up the PowerPoint. This is the last slide of the PowerPoint presentation. The main things that we wanted to make sure that you understood about 856 is, one, the Elasticsearch. 856 is replacing Secure Enterprise Search, which you're not using today, as it's my understanding. So you don't have an impact there, but I do think you should revisit the global search because the Elasticsearch does make that a lot easier to take advantage of that.
Is it still, the SES had to be on a separate server? Does Elasticsearch, is that similar for Elasticsearch?
It ends up having a different web server, but I believe you set up 3.
Yes,
Three.
yes, it has its own server environment. We actually, we have an area within the My Oracle support site on all the recommendations that we have as far as the minimum number of what we've configured for nodes for that server and any other configuration recommendations based on the types of data and transactions you tend to be working with.
Okay,
But yeah,
so,
it's its own server.
and how fast does that respond? I put in my term for response. Is it like Google? Will it know what I'm asking before I finish typing it?
It's funny you say that because it's used by like Amazon. Elasticsearch is used by some of the big. Trying to think of some of the others. I used to know it all right off the top of my head, but it's used in a lot of the applications that use today on the web. So it's pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we touch responses with the application.
You're kind of breaking up a little bit here, John.
Yeah, we may have lost John there, but the whole point with 856, Elasticsearch is the only search of it. So do you use Verity for anything? Okay, all right, because that's also being replaced by Elasticsearch. It's open source, so it's not an Oracle proprietary software, and there's some really good. I don't know if it was like eBay or something, but some of those websites, a lot of them use Elasticsearch as their primary crawling tool. So the second point is the page composer. Really, I want to say page composer, and it's not really tools, but I'd also add the page and field configurator to this list. Cloud Manager isn't relevant today, but in the future it may be. And I'm only mainly mentioning at this point because it has been a major focus as part of the tools release. It's where a lot of time is being spent and effort, but it's something that wouldn't be relevant at this point for you. And the last thing is, we talked about Classic Plus, which is basically applying the fluid style to traditional Classic pages. So that's those are some of the 4 biggest changes that were made in 856.
They were talking earlier, Brandon, about some of the biggest bang for the buck people that move the fluid in the space seems to be fluid approvals, workflow approvals on phones. It's the biggest value immediately, which makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was my last slide, but this is actually my last one. So if you're not already familiar with, I know Rhonda sent some, or I guess Patrick, you sent some links out. Okay. If not, then Patrick will send out some links. Rhonda got together. I think she may still be on the phone, but she got some links together that may be beneficial to y'all to be able to dig deeper into a lot of the functionality we talked about today. And in addition, there's I thought that was on this slide here, but there's a whole user community out on My Oracle support. I mentioned that you could vote on future enhancements. You can submit those and other people can vote on them. So what it's meant to be is allow the PeopleSoft community to collaborate on what they want to see in future PUM images. And that's where I got this to, I think within like 20 weeks or so, they're able to take some of that feedback and have it in a PUM image. That may be on the quicker side for some of them, but it can be that fast if something is an urgent need.
So how do we get to that? So I've used the cumulative feature overview of the video features, but is the best way to get to the request for new features and vote on features through the information portal? What's the best way to get
When you
there?
go into My Oracle support, there's a communities option, if I remember. It's been a little while since I've been out there. And through that is where you would access the specific communities. They're separate ones. They primarily they bring it down to like a GL level and so forth. Has anybody been part of any of those? All right, so we'll make sure that that's included in the links that we send out to you, how to access that. I thought I had a slide that showed, I thought this one also showed the ability to go out into those communities.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. I mean, I remember in the olden days, the higher education user group used to send out pages and pages of enhancement requests, and you go through them. I remember going through them when my daughter was at Little League playing Little League camps. Go through all these pages to figure out which ones you wanted to vote on. So this seems much better, but I just haven't been able to latch on to where exactly to access that. So if you could provide that.
It's called idea spaces. That's the term they're using.
I'm on there now, and it's not intuitive how I get to there.
You're in idea spaces right now, or am I?
No, I'm in my
support?
Oracle support community, but I'm not sure.
I almost wonder if, yeah, it should be idea spaces. I may have said the wrong one there.
Well, anyway, so if you could provide us some instructions on that, that would be useful, I think.
All right, excellent. All right, so I'm going to flip around a little bit in the rest of this time we have.
Does anybody have questions on any of this functionality?
Has left the conference.
Sorry. Did have a question.
Do we have access to the page and field configurator now, or do we have to wait to a different version of tools, or do we have to wait till we get to 9.2?
I don't think it's in 9.1. It's in, it's part of.
I think they told us earlier when I asked that it's available in 9.2 to look at it during the upgrade.
Okay.
But we probably need to nail that down. There was another question I asked. Well, it wasn't available until 8.5.5.5.11, which isn't a problem because that'll be in our build for 9.2. But I made some notes. I'll have to go back and look for it. But that was one of the things that popped up. The lowest hanging fruit. And the people in the room got a little bit excited, saying we could maybe address some of our customizations.
Yeah,
that
think
are
about
on
that
high fields
campus
and pages.
vendor.
It's exactly what me and Becky were exchanging.
Yeah.
By contact.
Yeah, I would say that's probably number one. Then event mapping.
That was the other one we looked at. Event mapping and the page and field configurator we're kind of talking about back to back.
Okay, good.
Before the break.
Yeah.
So those are the two things I wrote down as the lowest hanging fruit for us to mess with.
Forms Builder is probably another one to think about as far as low-hanging fruit if you have any. So, but that may be extending functionality more than getting rid of current customizations.
Is that Form Designer? Because that was pretty good too.
It's Forms and Approval Builder.
Forms and Approval Builder.
There's a Page Composer. You maybe.
Yeah, I wrote them all down. Okay.
All right, so there's a few more things. I wanted to actually get into the app for a moment. I don't really have anything specific planned to show you here, but I just wanted to kind of crawl around a little bit.
Well, I think if anyone in the room has anything they want you to look at, they want to see, this would be a good time, right? So chime in.
Yeah, and I mean, this is basically from a mobile device. You can see when I changed the orientation, you know, it's changing the look and feel of the page. And you know, I mentioned there are multiple home pages, so here we have employee self-service. You know, I created something for you guys and published it as a tile called NC Demo, which is really it's just looking at some ledger information in a query that I built on the pivot grid. And what I'll do is show you a little bit about how how I was able to build that there, and I drilled into it.
Well, while you do that, one of the things that I know we use our homepage, landing page right now for is to post messages to our end users about something going on with the system and stuff. Would you perceive that being a banner to goes on to the Fluid page, or as another custom tile with a list of alerts, or and then we'd have to be able to make sure that that tile is always included on any child.
Oh, absolutely. And let's
pages or something, or at least landing pages when someone logs in, because I hear that it's user centric when it comes to Fluid, and users can configure their own home pages, but we want to make sure they always get this one tile that says, "Hey, this is what's going on," so they're not in the dark.
Absolutely, yeah. See right in the middle there, company news.
Okay.
That's an example of what that would look like here. Okay. And for some reason, my internet connection is a little bit slow. I think I'm just hitting AT&T's network, so I apologize for the little bit of delay there. Well, actually, I see it on my phone. Okay, for some reason, it's not rendering on the screen. But basically, that center tile right there does that exact same thing. It's very easy to add those, and I'll show you through the tile wizard how quickly you can develop a tile. And you can integrate HTML into that. YouTube videos, so it can have content into it. Let's see if this thing just let's try that. Just reset it here. Okay, there we are. We're back in business. Okay, so right there is the center of that, and you can drill into the news tile and see the details.
Go into the general ledger.
Sure. I may have to log in as a different user for general ledger.
That's fine. It's kind of curious to see the look and feel of that.
Or let's add the home page. All right, so let me switch to desktop mode.
After you get into the page, how do you know the page component name, page name, like those? Like a Control-Shift-JJ?
It's all in one place now. It's so from the tiles and everything, when you go into the portal, structure and content.
Okay, so you from there, but you don't know which one really affect that one. When you log in page, you know, okay, this is really I'm looking for, but now I know the content is so long, so much. Which one is social?
It's a little bit different way of looking at it, because it would be more of, okay, which home page are you on? And then from there, you would be able to troubleshoot things and get to it through structure and content. I didn't sign on my computer yet, so this will take me just a minute. But what I want to show you, not only adding another home page to the user, but we can add a tile for that user, and then of course, nothing can be easier. Don't you love security? And normally when I demo an environment like this, I already have it signed up and ready, and I was going to do that during the break, and that 15 minutes went by very quickly. Oh, so by the way, because I'm in an 855 environment right now, I wasn't able to do this, but starting the 856 from a mobile phone, the configuration I'm about to do to personalize a home page is available on a mobile phone. So the fact that I had to go back to desktop, when you get to 856, you won't have to do that to personalize a home page. But you can see on the left-hand panel here, we have all of the different home pages for this user. I just went into the personalized home page area, and here's the list of the home pages. What I'm going to do, if this user has access to it, I can click on the home page and grab another one. I'm not seeing GL as an available home page for this user, so maybe it's just hidden. Oh, the finance homepage came out in image 25, and I'm on image 24. So that would be why I'm not seeing the general ledger homepage. It came out in 25. So
is anybody besides me worried about the fact that how we provide support to people if we allow 5,000 users to move around where their tiles are?
that can be limited and locked down.
Good.
But it's also taken a lot of the power away from it. That's a common, very common concern, and I fully agree. There's a legitimate concern that if users have the ability to do personalizations, that then they're going to personalize it, call the help desk wondering why their screen doesn't look like the person next to them. To help overcome that, there is an option to easily go back to the default. And gosh, I demoed this probably about 6 months ago. But you can easily go back and just say, take that person back to default. So that's what I'm seeing is, for those that want to venture out, make sure that they have the full capability that's available with that concern. That's how that's being handled. But adding that tile to the page is simply clicking the add tile button and going in and selecting the item they want to see. So I'm in an employee self-service right now. If I wanted to add the general ledger,
there was a general ledger. Oh yeah, good.
So if I wanted to add the GL Work Center to my employee self-service page, or I can add a whole new home page called Finance. I was able to do that quickly. I'm saving. And now from here, once that completes, it automatically publishes the tile to the home page. And by scrolling down here, I have the GL Work Center. Click on the GL Work Center, and here we have our left pane navigation and the area in which to work in. And while I'm here, I mentioned during the PowerPoint presentation that we have actionable search results. So this is an example right here, journals ready to post.
Has detected that a minimum number of lines are connected to this conference. Do you want to continue your meeting? Press 1 to confirm.
Sorry. So here's what I meant by that. So from this results page, I can check on, let's say we'd probably have more than one transaction in a production environment. But if we had however number of journals ready to post, I don't have to go into the journal and post it or run a batch process. I'll just go into the actions and say post the journal. If there's anybody here who's a business analyst for General Ledger, this is one of my favorite pieces of functionality for GL, is the ability to go in and select journals and do a mass delete of journals. So I know at period end, there's always the issue of journals remaining. This is one of the ways that you set a deadline. If they haven't deleted the journals or copied them into a new period, this gives some functionality. It's probably going a little bit beyond technical discussion, but yes.
Can you do that also on budget journals?
On budget journals, I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm going to take that one down.
That example of mass sweep journals is actually something that our users have
which is part of the reason why I decided to show it just now. I knew it was,
They're manually doing it at month end every month.
it's a pain.
That would be a huge win.
But is there a capability to take journals that have not been completed or processed and select multiple ones to have them, to copy them to the new period?
Not to copy them to a new period in a multi, no. There isn't a mass copy, but that sounds like a great idea, space idea. Because that's,
Gotta give us that link.
Jack,
Jack just sent out
now,
something.
we delete them, and then the user has to put it back in, and then make.
Right, I mean, here's the problem, in distributed environment like ours, we're saying, okay, get rid of your journal, it didn't get it fully approved, so now we're not making ourselves more efficient, we're making ourselves less efficient by causing those people to have to re-enter the whole journal.
I fully agree, but I think there's a bigger picture problem as well, because if there's a journal that hasn't been entered and posted, then that means there's transactions that are impacting people's analysis that aren't in the system yet.
Right, I agree with you,
So
so I think that's
there's a bigger problem
too, but
of, so
Just the timing of how it has to go through a departmental workflow. So say I need to move a journal, then it goes through and my department approves it. The central OSR has to approve it sometimes, depending on the month. And then, it's the end of the month and we gotta get the month closed, so that journal hasn't made it through that whole process.
and that's a common complaint as a consultant that I would hear, it's taken us too long to get through the approval process. Now, a couple of things that from a technology perspective, since everybody here is interested in technology, the mobile approvals should help to some extent, but the problem is a lot of those journals are probably very complicated and it may require a little bit more analysis than what somebody's going to do on a mobile device. So that's understood. That would be a great item to create maybe a pivot grid to have on the dashboard to set up some monitoring alerts. So if something's sitting out there, stale dated items, if it's sitting in somebody's queue for too long, with an approval framework, you can set up escalations. So these are just things to think about because that transaction is holding up information that then people can't make the right decisions based off of what hasn't been done. So while it is a great idea, and I think putting it in the idea space is maybe a good idea, the real thing is, can you figure out a way to eliminate the core problem, which is journals are being created, not being posted in a timely manner. So, by focusing on that issue, you may find that that becomes less of a problem of copying the journals.
Yeah.
I have been there. I'm
Honestly,
realistic.
It's kind of a basic failure in design. So what ought to happen is that the sys date ought to be the journal date. So it doesn't make any difference because it's silly to have a system that says you got to have all of your journals for this period in by XYZ date, or else you're going to have to delete them. Right, what are we supposed to do? Not do transactions some of the days of the month? That's pretty silly design. Right, much better design is to say, okay, when this gets processed, we give the sys date to the items on that journal so they get processed in whichever period is open at the time, right?
Right, and
so it's not a very good
and
design.
I sympathize greatly with that. We've had, I've worked as a manager for an ERP department, worked very closely with accounting. Deleting journals, I had staff that would literally delete 1,000 journals because an interface would come through and oops, we had a problem in the interface, we need to rerun it, and then another 1,000 come in that really need to be posted. But also some of the timeliness, and especially when you have intra-unit type transactions going through. So I'm definitely someone who understands that issue. I'm trying to give you the tools that are available.
Yeah, I hear you.
There may be some deficiencies, real, perceived. It doesn't matter. It's a deficiency. Some of the ways may be trying to do the escalation in AW. I think that's one thing I think would be beneficial. All right, so let's kind of get back into our technical realm a bit. I've pre-staged some of this just to make sure first off, I didn't miss a step or something along the process. But what I'm going to do is go through from creation of a query all the way through pivot grid and then publishing something as a tile and just showing you what those different areas look like to, I guess, in a large part to alleviate any stress or concerns you might have about this new look and feel and how you're going to manage it. Because when you actually see it, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's doable. That's something that we can work with. All right, so I am going to do a little bit of traditional navigation here. So I'm going to first start off in Query Manager. And the purpose is I just wanted to show you from start what the query looks like and then how that goes through the pivot grid, what the different options are. Now, this example is probably a lot simpler than what you're going to have in real life. So I just took the GL ledger table and selected some of the key fields within the ledger. So we have our chart field information, accounting period, fiscal year, the amount posted, and I'm presenting the account type. So those are the fields I selected. My criteria is extremely simple. I just have one business unit and the join criteria to the record for the account type. So I can run this query, not a whole lot of data out there, but it sort of gives you an idea of, this is traditionally what you would be presenting to an end user. Here's your query. You can run it. They'll download it to Excel and then do something with it. All that's in the past. With pivot grids, we can extend the functionality of that query. So I'm taking the query that I built here and running through a wizard that actually converts that into a pivot grid. There's a little bit of a learning curve with pivot grids, but I would say it's nothing compared to the query tool. So, just remember when you all started, you didn't know anything about the query tool, and over the years, you got better and better at it, and you would still look at it and go, I would say there's still things I need to learn. Especially now there's connected queries and just all kinds of functionality around queries now as well. All right, so I kept my naming standards extremely simple. I just called the pivot grid the same name as my query, and I also made the title. Actually, we'll go ahead and change this. Let's say, I went ahead and changed the title. So this is the very first step of the wizard. We're just naming what this pivot grid's going to be. And by the way, you have pivot grids today. You could do this today if you wanted to. All right, so the next step is you select the fields that you actually want to display. So if for some reason I didn't want to display program, then I could uncheck that. I'm not going to, but I could uncheck it there, and program wouldn't be one of the fields related to the pivot grid. But I'm going to keep all of these checked because I created the query for the pivot grid, so I already decided which fields I wanted to see when I designed the query. Okay, the next piece shows, this really gives you the option of what you want to display when you drill down into the pivot grid versus what you want on the X versus Y axis. So I have chosen to display, next step I think is the X versus Y, but here I'm just saying what's part of the axis versus what we want to display. Okay, and here I'm starting off with the account being on the row, and then total amount is the column. So, and by the way, all of this defaults in, and you just select what's in these boxes here when you're actually developing it through the wizard. So I selected each one of these values. And there is a performance implication for how many rows you select. So I generally like to pick the one that has the most meaning and then set the rest to filter, because then later the end user can move things around a little bit if they need to change the look at it. However, for tiles, that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. And then the final step at this point is you get a preview of what your pivot grid's going to look like. Now, the preview has some limitations, so a lot of times I just use it just to make sure that I don't get an error. Because if you have a problem in one of the previous steps, this is the point where it will tell you about it, unless you just simply didn't do a required field or you added too much. There's some common things that will check for, but at this point is when you'll know for sure that you have something that will work. I'm going to save it. Now you have options at the bottom here to publish pagelets and some of those things, but I want this as a tile in the dashboard. So I'm going to, first of all, make sure the pivot grid views the way I want it to. So I'm going to go into Pivot Grid Viewer. And Pivot Grid Viewer, when it was first released, and that's probably the case in 9.1, what you have today, this would be the primary way that you would go in and see your pivot grid. You might have it out as a pagelet, but a lot of what the end users would end up doing is going through, searching for the pivot grid that they want to see, pulling it up in this page, and then interacting with the pivot grid at this point. If you went into your 9.1 environment and did this exact same pivot grid, it's going to have a much different look and feel. This is, for lack of a better, this is a much more modern presentation as opposed to what you'll see in 9.1. Functionality is about the same. You can still, in 9.1, you still have the option to filter. It's just not going to be in this left-hand pane. There's just things, it works a little bit more like Excel. If you've used Excel to create pivot tables, then the 9.1 version is a little bit more like the Excel look and feel. This is more of an application, embedded functionality.
So in 9.2, is it possible to embed some kind of link in the page rather than having to go to the pivot grid viewer?
Well, I think the preferred way is to create a tile, and that's what I was going to show you. And
good.
Yeah. All right, so now that we have a working pivot grid, the next thing would be next step would be getting it onto a page or a tile. So to bring that into a tile, I'm going to have to confess, I just learned how to do this last night. So that's
okay, our fingers are all crossed.
So let's see what happens here. All right, so we're going to go into People Tools portal. And through here, we have our tile wizard. And once this comes up, what will be displayed is all of the various tiles that are available. And normally what we'd do is click on the Create New Tile button and create the tile from scratch. Let's just go ahead and do the Create New Tile here. So we're going to call this UNC Expenses. I don't know if I needed the underscore in the title name, but I'm just used to doing that from creating queries and different things. So when we get to the data type, we have quite a few options. Free text is what you do your company news, news alerts and things where you can just enter whatever you need to in the tile. And then we have several other options, and I'm going to choose Pivot Grid for this demonstration here. Oh, I changed the name of it. Yeah, I forgot to change the name of it. Good call, thank you. Okay. .un? Maybe it's using the actual name. Okay, so here's the example. I've already used that pivot grid and created a tile with it. It probably knows that. So we're just going to fake this just a little bit. I'm just going to choose one that's here. If I've done this more than once, I probably would have known that, but I apologize. So at this point, you can add some additional descriptive information. It already defaults a target page name. So I guess there's a question earlier about how you find this, and it does get a page name. I could set a sequence number to define where that would appear. This is your portal navigation subfolder. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. No, I'm sorry. This is, there's different groups that the tiles get presented in when we go into
The folder for the time.
right structure and content. This is where it is for tiles. It's still under a different. Yeah, I'll show you later. Just remind me of that piece. So let's make this a general ledger. Yep, no, wait a minute. We'll keep it PeopleSoft and Alex. Okay, at this point you can set tile properties. So tile height and width, that's in inches. So we have the 1 inch tiles. Well, you can have, I think you can make it all the way up to 2 by 2 for it to display correctly on a mobile device. Anything larger than that, then you start getting into real estate issues on some of your small. So there's no guarantee after 2 by 2. We can tie an image to it. There's an image library that's out there to be able to create the image that you want to see on the tile. Of course, a pivot grid, you want to see the actual pivot grid itself. So you can leave that as a default if you want. And then there's quite a few other options, and I'm not going to get into the details of all of those. But the final step at this point is to review your data and click this publish button. Once you click publish, that creates the tile, but it doesn't necessarily put it anywhere yet. Now you then configure where you want to put it. There may be an easier way to do this, but I'm going to show you how I know how to do it. I still find this pretty easy. We'll go into structure and content. I hit the wrong one. Save changes out. I hit yes. As many years as I've been using PeopleSoft, I still get that backwards so many times. Do you want to leave it? Do you want to remain on this page? I'm thinking it's asking me if I want to leave it. All right, so I'm in structure and content, and what you'll notice is there's a new folder called Fluid Structure Content. So if I go into Fluid Structure Content and then Fluid Home Pages, because we would want to add this tile to one of the home pages, you're presented with all the different home pages. So at this point, pausing for a second because all right, so we're going to go into employee self-service. And then within the tile content here, we have our various options for which ones we want to see. So I'm going to search for I think I just realized something. I think I'm in structure and content for portal and not for FSCM. Let's see what I did here. Okay, this is what I'm expecting. I'm sorry, I was in the wrong domain there. So here's our project management homepage. When I first went in there, I thought this doesn't look right, but I just wanted to move on there. So going to the tile content tab. If I scroll down, here's our NC demo. If I wanted to publish this to all users, I simply click on that tile, choose to publish the tile. If it wasn't already published, I'd be able to select it here and then publish the tile to the home page. Let me see something here. These various options, like optional will mean that it's available so somebody can add it to a home page. Yeah, but if they didn't have that capability, they would never be able to add it if that was locked down. If you choose optional default, that means by default that tile will be on their home page. Required is what we'd want for our employee news, where it's going to be there. Nobody can delete it. Nobody can touch it. It's just going to be there. And that may be a way around making sure people at least don't delete things from their home pages, is to set them to required. I'm going to make this one optional default. Okay, and again, if I didn't have it published already, it would be here, and I would click this publish button. It'd run an App Engine program that takes all but 30 seconds to run, and it would be available for all users. So that's kind of a summary of the tile. But sorry, that wasn't as clean as I would have liked to have presented it, but that was the second time I did it, so sorry. There's some.
Right. We're kind of going to 12.
I'm supposed to be going to 12.
Okay, so this has been very interesting. Sorry I couldn't be here for it all. Does anybody have any questions? Any burning questions about something that you've heard about that you didn't see?
Just a question. Whatever we did, who is a user going to do that?
For which?
What kind of label user going to do this?
Well,
Create a tile.
That would be technical.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't see that
this is
being.
someone in this building,
Right.
not a user. It's a technical or functional staff member.
Right.
Yeah, again, that could vary. It could be a security group. It just depends upon how people fit some type of technical role.
Yeah, everyone except our admins and DBAs are in this building. Unless we need their help, it should be somewhere.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. really sorry that yesterday kind of
Yeah.
wrapped up and you had to sit through a lovely but very cold day in North
Yeah,
Carolina.
we appreciate you guys making it in today and at least getting today's content covered. So thank you guys for that and for your participation and questions. I know we didn't kill you with the PowerPoint. We try not to do that by PowerPoint. So thank you for Andrew and John. They're the real talent. So thank you guys.
Yeah, and thank you for your understanding. John was going to originally present this, so there are some slides where I kind of did things out of order, and I hope that didn't create too much of a distraction.
You know
but thank
what,
for
you
your
know
patience.
more about it than most of us do, so we wouldn't have known if you